Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Today I've got the Ten of Wands as the obstacle and the Two of Wands as the opportunities. Kind of interesting because the Ten is right at the end of the cycle, and it seems a little weird to me to look at the opportunity as being something that exists earlier on in the set. Generally, I think of the 10 as it's this critical moment right before transformation into the next suit. In this case, the suit of aces, and yeah, for the opportunity to be like earlier on in the suit, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, this card made me think about creativity. One of the peak creative acts that I think the tarot describes sometimes is having kids creating life. The wands is a suit that symbolizes creativity, physical activity, and sexuality, which creating a child through the physical activity of sex is kind of it's one way certainly of putting a bow on everything. Um, but I don't know. Today I was kind of just focusing mostly on the aspect of this as representing creativity and maybe in an abstract sense, and how you could have some sort of path in life, a career, a hobby that is a creative one. It's a creative outlet. You could keep getting better and better and better at it. And now I think it's also important to note that the kind of creativity associated with the wands, it's not like scientific discovery, which some people credit as, oh, they created this new theory or something. And it's like, science, that kind of intellectual scientific activity of the swords, it can certainly uncover things, but it's not so much concerned with creating new things. So it's a little different. But yeah, I kind of see this as a card in a sense that is this this peak state of creativity, and yeah, it has that big difference from the swords of it being impulsive, instinctive. You're in the zone. It's a flow state. It's that kind of creativity and movement that happens automatically. Like in what when both the wands and the swords are kind of, they could be seen as weapons, right? With the wands being a stick is a very primitive weapon, and a sword is this. It's certainly a peak of abstraction of the stick. It's like we make it sharp, we make it durable. It's got a point. Um, but one of the differences there, I think, is that the the sword in terms of its application in combat and how it's designed is a thoughtful meditated approach. I imagine, like in those Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, I really love those scenes where, as he's in a fight, he has this little moment of internal focus, and he starts, you hear him narrate where he's going to attack, in what order. It's like, first, slap the guy on the ears, debilitate his sense of balance. Then, he's a drinker. He probably has this weak spot. Go after the liver. And like, that's very much a sword thing to do. Mind you, in an actual fight, I imagine that there's very few professional fighters who are able to actually think and plan like that. Um, I think one of the things that you learn if you ever pursue martial arts extensively is you get to the point where you realize that your instincts are far faster than your ability to think and make decisions consciously and then act them out. So at a certain point, you're just starting to only train your instincts, because that is the most valuable thing. And so there's something about the wands. I think of If you're a really creative person, the wands represent those aspects of creativity that are spontaneous and impulsive, not sitting there, poring over things that might inspire you. It's not a methodical process, but yeah, I think the 10 could be this complete state of it's that complete state of consumption with the creative, and the creative now exists on this meta level where you're something like a 2 could be like creativity that exists just on a very basic, just physiological level, like the creation that just exists in the earth. The 4 and 6 would relate, in varying degrees to creative acts related to human beings. The 8 is now certainly an abstracted form. It's creating abstract ideas, let's say creating poetry that is intangible in its connection to people or the physical world. And the 10 here is sort of like it's like a totality of all those things. I kind of see this as, like being creative with your creative approach to creativity. It's like meta layers of creation. And yeah, and I think it could be consuming, like all 10s. That is often the obstacle, is that it's rigid and doesn't, and it traps you. Like I said, the next card is the Ace of Swords, and it's a radical, violent transformation, revolution to a completely new paradigm, a completely new way of interacting with life and with the world. And it's the birth of this way of, just interacting, abstracting the world. The sword appears, the idea appears for the first time. You're planning and thinking and interacting with words interacting with language in a calculated sense. But yeah, so this could, in some sense, this could be like the issue here could be the resistance to making that change. Sometimes people like I like old school turntablism, and by old school I mean like, I don't know, the 90s, and there was this one turntablist, people who scratch vinyl, kind of hip hop aspect of hip hop. There was this guy, Qbert, and Qbert entered the DMC. It's the big competition for turntablism. He entered and won first place so many years in a row that they barred him from competing, and they made him a judge. I think that's an interesting and apt interpretation of the sort of the ideal realization of the 10 and how it transforms into the suit of swords, right? It's like you could be this amazingly successful artist that just these actions just pour out of you, and at a certain point people are like, we need you as a judge, we need you as a teacher, we need you as an academic, and at that point it's at that point the thing that's needed from you is to no longer engage in this impulsive, instinctive activity, and start to actually slow down and think about what it is that you do and how you do it and explain it and put it into words. So it's like, I used poetry as an example, but it would only apply in a kind of poetry of like improvised poetry. But yeah, so sometimes, sorry, I had a phone call, so I'm trying to remember where I left off. So sometimes you need, or not you need, sometimes it's almost like the world needs you to start thinking about how it is that you have, achieved this degree of creative ability in whatever field, it's staying in this position, staying in this place indefinitely, is its own obstacle in a sense, right? Because Um, like, yeah, you're going to be affecting, you're affecting the world. You're affecting at some point, even just becoming curious about your own. Like, there's only so long that you could go on doing things, creating things automatically without consuming yourself with questions about how it is that you're doing what you're doing in the first place, right? It's like, it's kind of, I feel like it's a natural aspect of sophistication in any field where, once you just become fully consumed with something, sooner or later you have this moment where you wake up one day and then you're like, what have I been doing this whole time? How have I been doing it? What is it? And then, yeah, on the flip side, as far as the opportunity, I guess usually I try to connect these two. So it was a little weird to be like, what's the opportunity going backwards? But yeah, it's the first sort of state of the first balanced state in this theme of creation and activity and movement and sexuality and reproduction. Um, and I think that this could be representative of like seeing the world, first of all, seeing the world with fresh eyes, right? Like, this is, besides the Ace of Wands, which is just kind of this, like, the aces are just like, they just signify it's like incoming new suit, new theme, everything is possible. Nothing is yet defined or set in stone, right? It's, the suit really starts at 2 and ends in 9. Like, the 1 and the 10 are kind of these sort of, yeah, they define the whole. They're not really as much of a part of the internal workings of the suit, in my opinion. But yeah, but I think the 2 is like, this is like, you look around, often as a kid, but it could just be, seeing the world again in a childlike way. It could be, maybe you had a kid, or you're interacting, you could be babysitting a kid, or you could be at a family reunion, but maybe it's your own kid. Being around children kind of forces you to see the world through their eyes, to some degree. It's a really wonderful, fascinating, and kind of terrifying experience, But yeah, so I think this card symbolizes that, looking out onto the world, seeing the surroundings around you, and seeing things as being stable and fixed. That's certainly something that relates to the 2. The 3 is also a very early, primordial, interaction with the world, but the 3 is in movement. It's changing. It's chaotic. It can be scary. Things are, this one is, it's stable. Things have their roles. In a way, the childlike way of seeing the world is like, everything that is just is. It is the way it is. It's also kind of like an autistic way of seeing things, in a sense, where everything you discover feels rigid. You haven't experienced things enough to really be able to tell that, oh, things are this way one day, but I've seen this place a couple of times now, and it's always different. It's always changing. You can never predict it. Which, I mean, this card represents the archetypal experience of seeing a world that is rigid, the 3, a world that is always changing. Neither of them are necessarily accurate, because both are true, and both sometimes are completely inaccurate in representing the world. But yeah, this, I think, represents seeing things as being fixed, and also, the creativity and the activity and the movement of the wands, the sexuality, which at this point I would argue might be like, the person seeing this world might not have enough sophistication to interpret things sexually in an adult sense. This, again, like, imagine a kid seeing how people relate to each other in relationships, even though adults interacting with each other, particularly if they're in, intimate relationships, it's like, a large part of that is their sexuality. It's like as a kid, and I'm using this all as a metaphor, but it's like as a kid, you're naive to what underlies these relationships, but you're nonetheless seeing these dualities, these relationships. There's these men and women, and they interact with each other in these ways that seem consistent. You're perceiving these consistencies, and the consistencies are largely defined by their opposition to each other. So it's like the two wands in the Marseille card, kind of forming this X, kind of like you could kind of imagine like two people sparring with sticks and just being evenly matched. I kind of see this card as representing an experience of the world that's like, here's another example. Like people, I have a couple of friends that to them the world is like, they have these very straightforward definitions of the world. They're like, oh yeah, everything is it's just the struggle it's just the elites trying to suppress the proletariat or whatever. It's like, that's what it is. It's this really simple explanation. The world is just in this perpetual conflict between these two states, or sometimes people will be like, oh, well, it's always so simple to them, right? And again, this is like, there's a certain simplicity and lack of nuance here. Oh, it's just Russia versus the United States or something. Like these two sort of equally opposing forces, locked in this struggle, this juxtaposition that is just, it's static, it's balanced. The way things are this balance of these two forces struggling, and yeah, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities for insight here, even though this is an oversimplified way of looking at things. It is a way of looking at things, just like just like potentially the Ten of Wands is an extremely high level abstracted version of looking at things. This card completely misses the really simple, straightforward interpretation of the world that this card sees. This card misses all the nuance of the 10. But so I think the opportunity here is just to, consider your place in the world and the opportunities presented to you just in the most basic interactions, the most basic ways in which you are juxtaposed against other people. Like what is the contrast in the relationships between you and people in your life, your family members, people you don't know? How are your actions juxtaposed against the actions of others? Just the simple global overall kind of stories. I also really like the illustration for the Waite card. This individual standing on the edge of this wall, presumably of some nice, safe structure, looking out onto the world. And yeah, there the juxtaposition. It kind of see it's like nature versus, it's like all of the nature and wilderness out there, and then all of the civilization and safety and security in here. But the order here and the chaos out there, and the freedom out there, and the rules that govern everyone in here, like those types of basic dualities that influence activity. Also, I think it could represent a type of, like, I think that kids are motivated by impulses, hormones, all sorts of things that are like, they don't exist at the present time to get the kid to like form sexual relationships or go out and fight battles or whatever. But nonetheless, they're like little training exercises to start introducing the kid to activities that will eventually evolve and mature into those things. Like, I was listening to something hilarious the other day. People were describing, someone was talking about, tickling. Why are people ticklish, and why is tickling a thing that amuses people? And how it was like, they were interpreting it in like as an activity that's useful to train individuals to kind of like to combat. Like all the places you're ticklish are highly vulnerable places that if someone reaches and touches you, it's like there's this natural response to like defend yourself against that person being able to access that area, right? And yeah, and how like that is a very early form of essentially combat training, uh, learning about where your vulnerabilities lie, like that kind of stuff, learning about being like overpowered. And yeah, so these aren't, you know, no one, I imagine anyway, no one who's like goofing around with their son or daughter and they're tickling them, the parents aren't thinking, I'm training you, I'm preparing you for the combat that you might have to get into decades from now. The kid certainly isn't thinking that, but nonetheless, there's a lot of energy and inspiration and potentiality that like inspires that activity, right? And I think this card also sort of symbolizes that. It's like there are things that you could be getting excited about. There are things that could be inspiring right now that might not seem like they're connected to anything significant, but the reason that they are inspiring and interesting is because they are precursors to more important activities or modalities of being and existing in the world, and in this case, in the world of actions and physical relationships and creativity and sexuality and things like that. I remember reading an author who was making claims that, for a long time, education was tied to eros in the sense that like the reason that people were motivated to become educated was because they saw being educated as inseparably tied to your ability to essentially pair bond with someone. Like during a time when casual hookups didn't exist and individuals went through extensive courting, right? The courting that you would need to go through to establish yourself as the kind of person who, anyone will commit themselves to intimately, as far as a relationship, sex, whatever, the kind of evidence you had to show and the kind of evidence that had to be shown to you in order to, feel confident moving forward with a relationship was like, there were many aspects of it that were academic, right? And so courting was like partially showing off that you're not an idiot, showing off that you can think creatively and constructively and that you're intelligent and quick-witted and that you've studied your history and that you're not ignorant, all these things were essentially tied to, your ability to like find a partner in life, find an intimate partner. And yeah, so this author was making the argument that like, that was a really great way to harness that sexual urge, for young people. They just saw it as being just directly connected to learning and bettering yourself. I kind of feel like maybe for a lot of people that is not really a thing anymore. But I think this card also, in a sense, could kind of represent that. Like it's that kind of energy that could be like often people that become single, all of a sudden they're single, and all of a sudden just the idea of like, okay, like I'm gonna get out there, I'm gonna start dating, but like I gotta get in shape, I gotta get some good clothes, I gotta like, maybe I should do something with my life. What am I even gonna say to people when I meet them? What am I gonna say? Oh yeah, I'm working this job, I need a better job, I need to like do something creative. Like all the aspects of your life that can potentially benefit from all this inspired energy that at its core ultimately is driven by, sexuality, relationships, those types of potentials on the horizon. But yeah, so I think the opportunity here is maybe to take advantage of that kind of energy, that kind of inspiration. It certainly helps. This is a huge thing that I think deserves its own video, but so many people that I interact with have such crippled and stunted fantasies of the future. So many single people that I know, if I ask them to imagine their perfect partner, they list off faults. They can't even imagine in their imagination, which, should be limitless. They can't even imagine a perfect partner that has no problems, that they have a perfect dreamlike coexistence with. Now, I'm not saying, imagine the thing that's likely to happen, but just literally, like, as a thought exercise, if you can't imagine some ideal partner, like that, like, what is contributing to that limitation, right? Like, I think it's a really interesting phenomenon, and not just relationships. People, asking people, what's your, like, if you could do anything 5 years from now, like, what would it be? What would you want to do? And it's like, people don't even give themselves the freedom to openly dream with, like, ridiculous fantasies, like as crazy as you want, like outer space, like whatever, right? They don't have to be reasonable. Just have some fantasy that serves as a guiding point, And so I think often one of the reasons that people don't benefit from the kind of energy that I think this card, in part represents is, let's say you're single. It's like, if your outlook on life and the potential of dating is like, well, there's no one good out there, everyone's just a self-centered asshole. It's like, of course, why would seeing the world that way ever inspire you to go out there and look, to improve yourself, to get in the best shape you could be in so that you could rise up to the occasion of being with that ideal partner that you imagine, right? But yeah, that card isn't about necessarily not having that ideal, but still, it's an interesting aspect of, I think, what lands a lot of people in this state of apathy. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. There's some wonderful cards that we covered. Thanks for watching. Drop me a like if you enjoyed the video, and comment free reading, please, if you would like to be entered in a weekly draw for a free reading. We just had our first exciting winner who probably hasn't read the message and is unaware of it, and I may never hear from them. So, new week, new opportunities for all of you. Take advantage. All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.